The silence sliced through the party like a blade. Every conversation stopped. Every glass froze mid-air. Every gaze turned toward the center of the marble hall, where she was kneeling. A waitress. A single mom. Black skin glowing under the crystal chandeliers of a mansion that cost more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. And the owner of the mansion, a powerful, ruthless man, used to controlling everything, stood in front of her, demanding answers. Open it, now, in front of everyone. Her hands were shaking. The fear in her eyes was real, because inside that old, worn-out backpack was a secret she never wanted to reveal. When the zipper was pulled, when the items began to appear one by one on the icy floor, the most powerful man in that mansion froze, because what he saw there wasn't what he expected. It was something his money had never been able to buy back, something that made his past explode right in front of his eyes. And in that moment, everything changed. This is the story of a backpack, of a mother, of a man who had everything, except what truly mattered, and of a night neither of them would ever forget. The mansion rose imposingly over the hills of Beverly Hills, California. Its mirrored glass windows reflected the orange sunset of that Friday in June, as imported cars paraded through the circular driveway, paved with authentic Portuguese stone. Bentleys, Maseratis, and Teslas lined up, guided by valets in white gloves who never dared look their owners directly in the eye. Inside the residence, the soft sound of a string quartet filled the main hall. Baccarat crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting golden reflections across the Italian marble that covered every square inch of the floor. The French doors stood open to the terrace, offering a view of the entire city, a blanket of lights beginning to flicker as night fell. It was the annual party of Richard Holloway, real estate tycoon. 62 years old, impeccably combed gray hair, custom-tailored Armani suit. He moved among the guests with the ease of someone born into that world. Firm handshakes, calculated smiles, conversation that sounded warm but never revealed anything real. Around him, businessmen, politicians, minor celebrities, and heirs to old fortunes formed small circles. The women wore dresses that cost more than compact cars. The men drank whiskeys aged for decades. Everyone spoke loudly, laughed the right way, at the right moments. Here, every gesture was rehearsed. Every word weighed. Among the guests, no one truly saw one another. They exchanged business cards, not stories. Compared net worths, not scars. At the edges of that gleaming hall, another reality moved in silence. The service staff slipped in and out of the kitchen doors like efficient shadows. Black and white uniforms, quick steps, eyes down. Waiters carried trays of lobster canapés and flutes of Veuve Clicquot champagne. No one said thank you. No one asked their names. Among them was Bianca, 34 years old, black skin lightly glowing under the warm kitchen lights, hair pulled into a tight bun. She held the tray with both hands, balancing 12 full glasses as she crossed the hall. Her shoulders ached, her legs burned. She'd been on her feet for 7 hours. Bianca didn't belong in that world, and she knew it from the moment she passed through the mansion gates 4 hours earlier. But she needed to be there. The $300 day rate would cover half the overdue rent, and she couldn't afford to turn down work. She served in silence, dodging conversations that would never include her. She watched everything with almost painful attention: the texture of Persian rugs, the scent of expensive perfumes mixed with refined food, the cold sparkle of diamond rings on hands that grabbed glasses without ever touching the fingers that served them. No one saw her, and she preferred it that way. But there was something Bianca carried that night, beyond the tray. Leaning discreetly against the pantry wall, a worn navy blue backpack was hidden between supply boxes. She checked the backpack every 20 minutes. Just a quick glance, just to be sure, because inside that backpack was the reason she couldn't mess up, couldn't draw attention, couldn't be seen as anything other than invisible. And for 3 hours it worked, until it didn't. It was a careless move. An unintentional shove from another waiter in the narrow hallway between the kitchen and the hall. The tray wobbled. Bianca twisted her body to compensate. 2 champagne flutes slipped and crashed onto the marble floor. The sound of shattering glass sliced through the music like a blade. Silence. Every eye in the room turned toward her. And among all those stares, one weighed more than the rest. Richard Holloway stopped his conversation mid-sentence, slowly turned around. His ice-blue eyes locked onto Bianca, frozen in the middle of the hall, surrounded by shards of glass and spilled champagne. He said nothing, but his face said everything, and Bianca knew in that exact second that the night had changed. Bianca dropped to her knees quickly, starting to gather the glass shards with trembling hands. The silence around her felt heavy as lead. She could feel dozens of eyes drilling into her back, but she didn't dare lift her head. She just repeated in her mind, "Pick up, clean up, get out of here, back to the kitchen, don't draw attention again." One of the party's security guards approached with a dustpan and broom. He said nothing, just gestured sharply for her to leave. Bianca stood up, her palms burning with small surface cuts, and walked back to the kitchen with her head down and her heart racing. As soon as she pushed through the stainless steel double doors, the noise and heat of the kitchen swallowed her. Pots clanging, orders being shouted, the heavy smell of roasted meat and rich sauces. The chef, a Frenchman with a thin mustache and an explosive temper, didn't even look at her. He just pointed at a new tray. Bianca took a deep breath, washed her hands quickly at the sink, and grabbed the tray. But before heading back out, her eyes darted to the pantry. The backpack was still there, half hidden behind wine crates. She stepped closer, checked the zipper, felt the familiar weight. Inside the backpack was everything that mattered in that moment: a portable nebulizer, 3 vials of bronchodilator medication, a digital thermometer, a change of children's clothes, a battered teddy bear, and a cheap phone with a cracked screen showing the last message received. "Mom, the fever went up again. It's 38.7. Grandma's worried." Bianca closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one, because any longer would have meant falling apart. Her son, Noah, was 5 years old. Chronic asthma. 2 hospitalizations in the past year. The cheapest health insurance on the market covered almost nothing, and the meds that actually worked cost a fortune. Bianca's mother, Donna Celia, watched the boy while she worked, but she was getting older, tired, and Noah needed constant attention. Bianca worked 3 jobs. Monday through Wednesday, she was a cleaning assistant at a downtown hotel. Thursdays and Fridays, a waitress at events like this. Saturdays, a house cleaner in upper-middle-class homes. Sundays, when she had any energy left, she took delivery gigs. She slept 4 hours a night, ate leftovers, wore the same pair of jeans for 2 years. Couldn't remember the last time she'd bought something for herself. But Noah was alive. He was breathing. And as long as she could pay for the meds, it would stay that way. The backpack was there because Bianca had nowhere else to leave it. She didn't trust shared lockers with strangers. She couldn't risk it disappearing. Inside it was Noah's night nebulizer treatment. She needed to leave at 11, catch the bus, get home before midnight to give him the treatment. Everything was timed. Everything depended on her not messing up. And she'd shattered 2 champagne glasses in front of everyone. Bianca adjusted the backpack, shoved it deeper into the pantry, and returned to the hall with the new tray. This time she walked even more slowly, every step calculated, every movement controlled. She served smoked salmon canapés, gave a faint smile when someone took something from the tray, though no one ever returned it. She was part of the decor, functional, disposable. But as she moved through the room, Bianca noticed something unsettling. Richard Holloway was watching her, not openly. He kept talking with a group of businessmen near the black marble fireplace, but his eyes followed her. Every time Bianca passed one of the large wall mirrors, she caught his reflection, and he was watching. It made her nervous, very nervous. Would he complain to the catering company? Would she be dismissed before the night ended? Would she lose the day's pay? Bianca quickened her pace, trying to finish her round. She needed to get back to the kitchen, stay out of sight, survive the next 2 hours. But when she turned across the hall toward the kitchen, Richard Holloway stepped forward and blocked her path. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at her with those cold blue eyes, like he was analyzing something he couldn't quite understand. Bianca swallowed hard. The tray trembled slightly in her hands. And then he spoke, in that deep, controlled voice that commanded boardrooms and million-dollar deals. "You! I need to speak with you! Now!" Bianca's heart slammed in her chest. She felt the blood rush to her face, her hands sweating around the silver tray. Richard Holloway stood directly in front of her, blocking any possible escape. Around them, the guests began to notice the scene. Conversations dropped in volume. Curious eyes turned toward the center of the hall. "Sir, I'm sorry about the glasses," Bianca murmured, keeping her eyes down. "It was an accident. It won't happen again." "It's not about the glasses," Richard replied, his voice firm but not aggressive. He took a step to the side, studying her with a disturbing intensity. "You're carrying something that shouldn't be here." Bianca's stomach dropped. She blinked, confused, trying to process what he was saying. How did he know? How could he know about the backpack? I don't understand, sir," she tried, her voice cracking. Richard crossed his arms. "I watch everything that happens in my house. I saw you checking something in the pantry 3 times in the last hour. Same spot, same pattern." He paused. "You brought something here that doesn't belong, and I need to know what it is." The silence around them deepened. More people stopped talking. One of the security guards approached discreetly, stopping just a few feet away, waiting for instructions. Bianca felt her legs weaken. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but her feet felt glued to the marble floor. "Mr. Holloway, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I need this job. I didn't do anything wrong." "I swear." "Then show me what you're hiding," he said, his tone turning harder. "Now, in front of everyone." It felt like the ground had opened beneath her feet. Bianca looked around. Dozens of faces stared back at her, some curious, others filled with contempt. A few had already pulled out their phones ready to record whatever happened next. She was an intruder, an outsider, and in that moment everyone saw her as a threat. "Sir, please." She tried one last time, tears beginning to blur her vision. "It's nothing that will hurt anyone." "Then there's no reason to hide it," Richard shot back, unrelenting. He extended his hand. "Bring it here. Now." Bianca swallowed hard. Her hands were shaking so badly the tray nearly slipped. She set it down on a side table, wiped her sweaty palms on her black uniform pants, and slowly walked toward the kitchen. Every eye followed her. She pushed through the double doors, entered the pantry, and grabbed the worn navy blue backpack. The fabric was faded, the zippers rusted. That backpack was more than 10 years old. It had once been hers, back when she was still studying, before Noah was born, before everything fell apart. She returned to the hall, clutching the backpack to her chest, as if protecting something sacred. Richard Holloway stood in the same spot, waiting. The security guard had moved closer. Some guests whispered among themselves. "Put it on the floor and open it," Richard ordered. Bianca slowly knelt on the cold marble. Her hand shook so badly she could barely grip the zipper. She looked up one last time, meeting Richard's eyes, filled with restrained tears. "Please," she whispered, "don't make me do this." But he didn't back down. He just waited. Bianca took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and then she opened the zipper. Slowly she began removing the items from the backpack, one by one, placing them on the marble floor. The white portable nebulizer, the 3 bronchodilator medication vials in their crushed cardboard boxes, the digital thermometer with a scratched screen, the child's change of clothes, a Spider-Man t-shirt and a worn pair of sweatpants, the teddy bear with one torn ear stitched back together with red thread, and finally, the cheap phone with the cracked screen. Bianca didn't look up. She couldn't. She just stayed there, kneeling, her hands trembling on her knees, while those simple, worn objects lay exposed on the gleaming floor of the most expensive mansion in Beverly Hills. There was absolute silence. Then Richard Holloway stepped forward. He looked at the objects on the floor, then at Bianca, and something on his face shifted. The cold, controlled expression began to crack. His blue eyes widened slightly, his jaw tightened. And for the first time that night, Richard Holloway looked completely human, because he had seen something money couldn't hide. He had seen the truth. Richard Holloway remained still, staring at the items scattered across the marble floor. The nebulizer, the medication vials, the patched teddy bear, the worn children's clothes. Each item told a story he didn't need to ask about to understand. He slowly crouched down and picked up one of the medication vials, turned it between his fingers, reading the label. Salbutamol, bronchodilator. His hands, usually steady and sure, trembled slightly. Around them, the guests stayed silent. Some lowered their phones. Others looked away, as if witnessing the moment made them complicit in something deeply uncomfortable. The music had stopped. Only the muffled sounds of the kitchen in the distance broke the silence. Bianca remained kneeling, head bowed, tears streaming quietly down her face. She didn't try to wipe them away. She didn't have the strength. Every layer of armor she had built to survive that night had collapsed. "How old?" Richard asked, his voice coming out lower than he intended. Bianca swallowed. 5. "Asthma?" She only nodded, unable to speak. Richard placed the vial back on the floor with almost reverent care. He stayed crouched for a few seconds, staring at the items as if seeing far beyond them. "You brought this because you had nowhere else to leave it," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a fact. I couldn't risk it disappearing," Bianca finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "He needs the nebulizer at 11 every night, every day. If I miss it, he has an attack. And I can't afford another hospital bill. Not again." Richard closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something was different. Something he had buried long ago beneath layers of success, power, and control. Pain. He stood up slowly and took a few steps back, rubbing his face. The guests watched, confused. No one understood what was happening. Why the host, always so ruthless and controlled, looked shaken. But Richard understood, because 23 years earlier, he had held objects just like these. A nebulizer, medication vials, clothes that would never be worn again. His daughter, Emily, had died at 7 years old. Acute asthma. A crisis in the middle of the night. He was on a business trip in London. By the time he got the call, it was too late. She had gone alone, with her mother desperate, without her father. Richard built an empire after that, made fortunes, bought mansions, filled his life with luxury and power. But he never managed to buy back what he lost, never managed to turn back time and be there. And now, there, in front of that woman kneeling on the floor of his mansion, he saw the reflection of everything he had failed to be. He looked at Bianca, truly looked at her. Not as a businessman evaluating an employee, but as one human being recognizing another. "Stand up," he said, his voice hoarse. Bianca hesitated, then obeyed. Her legs trembled. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to recover some sense of dignity. Richard looked at the security guard and made a sharp gesture. "You can go. That won't be necessary." The guard stepped back, confused, but complied. Then Richard turned to the guests around them. They all still watched. Expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to discomfort. "The party is over," Richard announced, his voice firm and controlled again. "Thank you all for coming. Good night." A murmur of surprise spread through the room. It was only 9:30. The party was scheduled to last until midnight, but no one dared question him. Slowly the guests began moving toward the exit, grabbing coats, calling for valets. In 15 minutes, the hall was empty. Only Richard and Bianca remained, surrounded by silence and the objects still scattered on the floor. He crouched down again and began picking up the items, placing them back into the backpack with a care that stunned Bianca. The nebulizer, the vials, the teddy bear, each object handled as if it were precious. When he finished, he handed the backpack to her. "What time do you need to be home?" he asked. Bianca looked at him, still in shock. 11, but I can take the bus. I always take the bus." Richard shook his head. "Not tonight." He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed a number. "Marcus, get the car ready, now." Bianca's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't accept—" "You can, and you will," Richard interrupted, his voice firm but not harsh. He looked straight at her. "Your son is waiting, and you're not going to be late." Bianca followed Richard to the garage in silence, still trying to process what had just happened. Her fingers tightened around the backpack straps against her chest, as if she needed proof that it was all real. The polished porcelain floor of the garage reflected the embedded LED lights in the ceiling. 5 cars were parked there, each worth more than she would earn in 10 years of work. Marcus, Richard's personal driver, was already behind the wheel of a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class. He opened the rear door without asking questions, without showing surprise, just silent professionalism. Richard gestured for Bianca to get in. She hesitated, staring at the spotless beige leather interior, the fine wood trim, the scent of a new car mixed with a subtle, expensive cologne. "I'm gonna mess up the seat," she murmured. "My uniform's sweaty, Get in," Richard said. No rudeness, just firm. Bianca obeyed, sitting on the edge of the seat like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. Richard got in on the other side and shut the door. The silence inside the car was thick, almost tangible. "What's the address?" Marcus asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Bianca gave it in a low voice. Maple Street, 847, apartment 3B, in Inglewood. Marcus nodded and pulled away. The mansion vanished behind them, swallowed by the Beverly Hills night. For the first few minutes, nobody spoke. Bianca stared out the window as wide, tree-lined streets gave way to more modest neighborhoods. Richard looked straight ahead, but his mind was clearly somewhere else. Then he broke the silence. "What's his name?" Bianca turned, startled. "Noah." Richard nodded slowly. "Noah," he repeated, like he was engraving the name into himself. "Does he know you work parties like mine?" "He knows I work a lot," Bianca answered, tired but honest. "He doesn't really understand what I do. He just knows Mom has to work so he can have medicine, food, a home." She paused. "Sometimes he asks why I'm not with him at night. I tell him it's because I love him, and he believes me." Richard closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was a wetness he fought to hold back. "My daughter was 7 when she died," he said suddenly, his voice coming out rough. "Emily, asthma, a bad attack in the middle of the night. I was in London closing a $20 million deal." He let out a bitter laugh, no humor in it. 20 million. Like that mattered. Bianca stayed quiet, not knowing what to say. "When I got the call, she was already gone," Richard continued. "My wife never forgave me, and I never forgave myself." He looked at Bianca. "I built all of this after. The mansion, the cars, the business. Like success could fill the hole, like money could buy back the time I threw away." He took a long pause, breathing in. "When I saw that nebulizer on the floor, when I saw that patched-up teddy bear," his voice broke. "I saw Emily. I saw everything I didn't do, everything I should have been." Bianca felt the tears rise again, but this time they weren't just hers. Richard was crying too, silently, hands clenched on his knees. "You're here," he said, looking straight at her. "You carry your kids' meds in an old backpack because you don't trust leaving them anywhere. You work 3 jobs to make sure he can breathe. You're everything I never was." "Mr. Holloway!" "Richard," he cut in. "Call me Richard." Bianca nodded, still trying to process how unreal this conversation felt. The car stopped in front of a 3-story building with peeling paint and bars on the windows. No doorman, no garden, just an exterior concrete staircase and a security door with a busted intercom. Bianca grabbed the backpack and opened the door. Before stepping out, she looked back at Richard. "Thank you," she said simply. Richard nodded. Then, before she could get down, he said, "Tomorrow at 10 in the morning I'm sending Marcus to pick you and Noah up. Right here." Bianca froze. "What? Why?" "Because I want to help," Richard said, his voice steady. "And because for the first time in 23 years, I have a chance to do the right thing." He held out a card. Bianca took it, still in shock. "At 10, he repeated. "Please, trust me." Bianca looked at the card, then at him, and then slowly, she nodded. She stepped out, crossed the street, and climbed the stairs to apartment 3B. Richard watched until she disappeared through the door, and for the first time in decades he felt something he'd forgotten existed: hope. Bianca walked into the small apartment and found Donna Celia sitting on the worn-out couch, holding Noah in her lap. The boy looked pale, struggling to breathe, his lips slightly bluish. His eyes lit up the second he saw his mother. "Mom!" he called, weak. Bianca dropped the backpack and rushed to him, kissing his hot forehead. "Mommy's here, baby. Mommy's here." She set up the nebulizer fast, with the muscle memory of someone who'd done it hundreds of times, popped the vial in, turned the machine on, fitted the mask over Noah's face. The familiar hiss of mist filled the apartment's silence. Donna Celia watched without speaking, tired eyes full of worry. "His fever went down a little," she said, "but he wheezed all night." Bianca just nodded, running her hand through Noah's curls while he breathed the medicine in. 15 minutes later, the boy's breathing began to ease. He closed his eyes, exhausted, and fell asleep in his mother's arms. Bianca carried him to the tiny bedroom they shared, laid him on the narrow bed, and pulled the thin blanket over him. She stood there, watching his chest rise and fall more calmly, and finally let herself cry. Really cry. Everything she'd been through, the humiliation, the exposure, the fear, had been worth it, because Noah was breathing, and as long as he was breathing she would keep fighting. But something was different that night, something she still couldn't fully wrap her head around. Richard Holloway's card was in the pocket of her uniform. She pulled it out and read it again. Richard Holloway, Holloway Real Estate Group, and a phone number. At 10 in the morning, Marcus would come get them. Bianca barely slept. When morning came, she bathed Noah, dressed him in the nicest clothes he had, jeans and a blue t-shirt with no holes. She combed his hair, put on his sneakers. Donna Celia looked skeptical. "You sure about this, Bianca? Rich people don't help for free." "I know, Mom," Bianca said, "but I need to believe there's goodness somewhere." At exactly 10, the black Mercedes pulled up in front of the building. Marcus stepped out and opened the door with the same silent professionalism. Bianca got in with Noah on her lap. The little boy stared around with wide eyes, amazed by the car. They were driven to a private hospital in Santa Monica, not the overcrowded public clinic Bianca always took Noah to. A modern, spotless, quiet hospital. Richard was waiting in the lobby. Beside him stood a man in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck. "Bianca," Richard said, waving. "This is Dr. Peterson, pediatric pulmonology specialist, one of the best in the country." Noah clung to his mother, intimidated. Bianca looked at Richard, her eyes full of questions she couldn't even form yet. "He's going to examine Noah," Richard explained. "Run every test he needs. And starting today, you have full medical coverage. Visits, medication, hospital stays, if necessary, all paid." Bianca felt her legs go weak. I can't accept that. It's too much. I have no way to pay you back. It's not a debt," Richard interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "It's a gift, from someone who lost the chance to do that for his own daughter, but can do it for you." The tears came back, but these were different. Relief, gratitude, hope. 3 hours later, Noah had gone through every test. Dr. Peterson prescribed a new, more effective treatment and promised monthly follow-ups. Richard also offered Bianca a steady job in the administration of one of his commercial buildings. Business hours, decent pay, full benefits. She wouldn't need 3 jobs anymore. Wouldn't need to carry a backpack full of fear and desperation. When Bianca left the hospital holding Noah's hand, she looked back. Richard stood at the entrance, watching. She waved. He waved back. And in that simple gesture, something was restored. Not just for her, for him too. The Beverly Hills mansion would still exist, the parties would happen again, but Richard Holloway would never be the same man, because he learned that dignity isn't measured in square feet of marble. It's measured in the weight of the backpack a mother carries, and in the courage it takes to open it when the world demands answers. Never underestimate someone who looks like they carry little, but carries everything in their heart. Judging is easy when you've never had to carry someone else's backpack. If this story made you reflect, share it with someone who needs the reminder that empathy is power too.